Do you struggle to build positive habits? Do you struggle to allow yourself to be on the right track for long enough to build a habit? Did you know that on average it takes about 21 days to fully get into a habit? And it takes about 66 days to seal that habit. And when I say seal that habit, that means become a ritual or tradition that you no longer have to think about. Now, inside of habits, there's 3 phases that you will go through to link and bind that habit. Now, those 3 phases first start with the initiation phase. Inside the initiation phase, it takes a little bit of work. This is where most people actually stay inside of the habit building process because they don't do it long enough. They don't follow the initiation process all the way through until it gets to the next phase of the habit building process. So, inside the initiation phase, this is the active thought of performing the action. What that means is I have to actually physically initiate myself to take action on it. Maybe it's when you have to wake up and go to the gym. That is the initiation phase of a habit building process. Now, once your body aligns to that habit or that daily action, then it moves to the next stage. But the initiation stage is the active thought and process behind doing the action. So anytime you're trying to positively move forward, the first week to 2 weeks is inside of the initiation phase. Inside this phase is where it takes the most amount of work. That amount of work is what you're doing to actively think your way to taking the action, and it's usually a little bit more forced. You're working actively to take action in this habit. From there, the second phase is called the learning phase. Inside of the learning phase, it actually becomes more enjoyable. Inside the learning phase is when you start to realize the things that you're doing and the actions that you have to take to start moving forward with that habit. This is when things become enjoyable to also learn, research, and become better at. You're past the stagnation point or the challenge point where it is painful, challenging, overwhelming, and complicated. Now is when you start to actually dial in the idea of the habit. You start to look for ways to make it better, more smooth, simpler, and easier for you to actually abide by. This might be streamlining a nutrition process such as meal plan or meal prepping. So daily meal prepping for the first 1 to 2 weeks is usually going to be in the initiation phase. You haven't fully thought out the process, you're just kind of winging it, and you're just having to force yourself to do it. Then after that, it becomes the learning phase. You start to learn how to control this process, how to make it smoother, transition, and become easier. It becomes something that you no longer have to actively think about every day to perform, and you're actively thinking of ways to make it better. From that second process, we move into the third phase, which is the stability phase. This phase is where most people are talking about when they go from the 21 days to the 66 days. So inside the first 1 to 2 weeks, we're usually in the initiation phase. From there, the second to third week, and even into the 4th week, we're in the learning phase. The learning phase continues all the way through this whole process, even when the habit is fully formed. However, after the learning phase has become something that you no longer need to do because it's become easy and you're running the same systems and protocols or habitual things that you do, you're then in the stability phase. It's about building the congruency between everyday action and what used to be non-daily action. So the stability phase is when it becomes easier and it becomes something that you think about less and less and less, and it naturally just happens. That is oftentimes, for most individuals, think of this like trying to get to work. When you first change jobs, let's say you change jobs and your location changes drastically. It changes by 15 miles. Used to be over here, now you go this way. The first week to 2 weeks, you're in the initiation phase. You actively have to think about how you're going to get to that new destination. After a couple drives there, usually about 1 to 2 weeks, you then start to try and learn how to get there better, faster, and with less traffic, with less stops, with having your Starbucks or your daily daily fix in the morning, how you can make it smoother or easier for you to stop in at the gym, right? So that is then the learning phase. Then the stability phase is when you start getting up naturally, getting in your car, and heading to the 3 spots that you normally would inherently, and then off to work. That is then the stability phase. You're ingraining and grooving the motion of the daily activity. That's why if you've ever started something and then you realize that every day you have to go get your Starbucks, that is your stability phase and your habit form. When you're in the stability phase, you can then continue to learn, but typically it's so hard for you to pattern interrupt yourself that you will continue to do the same habits and same rituals because they're stabilized. And as humans, we like to find ways to make everything as easy and streamlined as possible with as minimal amount of thought. That's when you start going on natural autopilot every day and taking these actions. Again, that's like getting in your car, driving to work, and then always having that Starbucks stop or breakfast stop that you might make. It might be the same thing in reverse coming home. That might mean that you go to the grocery store, you go to this other store, and you might even hit the gym and then head home. That is when you're in the stability phase. So when you understand the 3 phases of building a habit, you can find which one you're at and how to make it more enjoyable. Because one of the hardest things for building a habit is understanding and enjoying the habit building itself. Because initially it's painful, it's a struggle, it's oftentimes complicated and unnatural. Because we're fighting our own stability phases from past actions to now reinitiate a new habit that goes against our old stabilizing actions. So we're fighting our own selves when we're in the initiation phase based on an old stability phase. But when we find that we can enjoy the process and we understand it, it makes the process easier to perform. So again, for most people, they stay inside of the initiation phase, inside of an initial habit. The reason for that is because they never go to the next step, which is the learning or the stability phase, and that's why people continue to try and rebuild and do things over and over and over again without success, because they continue to jump out of the habit building form inside of the initiation phase. After the initiation phase has been cleared and they have moved into the learning phase, this is where things become a little bit more simple, easy, structured, and things that they can do more naturally. But still, they're still working against their own selves to force out an old stabilizing phase. From there, after they've worked through the learning phase, they've made things clear, they've gotten clear on what they're doing, the actions that they have to take, and it becomes a little bit simpler for them. They then move into the stability phase, which is basically making it simpler and simpler and simpler on the daily actions and steps that they would make, that now make it more autopilot and no longer have to work to do. So make sure you don't step out of a habit building process too early, otherwise you'll continue to repeat the cycle and fall back into an old stability phase and continue to fight yourself inside of reactivating an initiation phase. Now the other thing I want you to know is that it actually takes more work to get inside and through the initiation phase than anything else, right? To build momentum, you have the locomotion. So think about this like a train. The locomotion or the plane or a train, they have to work the most during takeoff, initiation phase. Now, once they are in motion, they're learning inside their own gadgetry, like the dashes of an airplane, the dashes of a train, to figure out where they're going to balance, right? So speed, and how fast they're going to go and control, right? Then once they are figuring it out, so now we're think like once an airplane takes off and it goes up, it's going through its learning phase during the clouds, but it has the most work it has to do getting off the runway. Once it's off the runway, it's into the learning phase, right? So we're now up in the air. We're going through the clouds. We're going through the rain. We're going through things up, 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 up. Once we're up above the clouds, that's when the plane meets the stability phase. So now you have a couple ways of thinking about your habit building phases. And again, as they come through that stability phase, now they become able to go on autopilot. And that's when things become simple. So use this phase system to understand where you are in your habit building process and how you can push yourself through to the next phase to make it actually easier and sustainable for you. So you can actually achieve your long-term results and goals without rebounding and going back into old stability phases that no longer serve you.